So you've likely heard the claim that as few as 0.1 to 1% of the total population are transgender. This is a range that has been used online, in the news, and even academia for more than a decade now, something that hasn't changed recently. And that's a problem. Why? Well, we have better numbers. In fact, we've had them for a couple years now, and whilst this news isn't exactly new, the facts that I keep hearing, the 0.1 to 1% statistic, makes the autistic in me itch like a bitch with fleas. Hence the video. That said, I can't really blame anyone for repeating this statistic. If someone looks up the rate of transgender people online, one of the first results is, of course, Wikipedia. And it is there, in the second paragraph, that we find a rate of less than 0.1% up to 0.6%, so even lower than the usual 1% upper rate thrown around. The idea that less than 0.1% of people are transgender comes from a 2014 Amnesty International report that suggests that there were as few as 30,000 transgender people in the EU back in 2014, which, by the way, would actually put the proportion of trans people as low as 0.0059%, given that the EU had a population of 507.4 million at the time. Though the report does note that this estimate is based largely on rates of gender-affirming surgery or other related treatment, with other studies saying that as many as 1.5 million EU citizens are trans, giving us a total of 0.29%. As for the 0.6% statistic, that's a bit more difficult to track down. The linked University of California San Francisco page puts the rates at 0.003% for trans women and 0.001% for trans men, based on a 2007 and 2009 study. But again, they acknowledge these numbers to be limited to those diagnosed with gender dysphoria and/or receiving support at gender identity clinics. Yet there is no 0.6% statistic. Though, after doing a little digging, it's possible that this comes from a 2016 post by the Williams Institute based on the Center for Disease Control's Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, giving us an estimate of 0.6%. Maybe the references for the page got messed up at some point, with old references being left in instead of being replaced. Either way, if you look it up, you're unlikely to find results that put the prevalence of trans people above 1%, let alone show actual evidence for it. Which brings us to the study I'd like to discuss today, and that is 2024's Disparities in School Connectedness, Unstable Housing, Experiences of Violence, Mental Health and Suicidal Thoughts, and Behaviors Among Transgender and Cisgender High School Students, Youth Risk Behavior Survey, United States, 2023. Phew, I just love big-ass research titles. Said paper was published as a supplement for the Center for Disease Control, and what they found was that as many as 3.3% of US high school students openly acknowledge themselves as transgender, with a further 2.2% stating that they were questioning their gender. Ignoring the questioning students for a second to compare the 3.3% to the earlier 0.6% statistic, that is a 5.5 times increase over the highest statistic given by Wikipedia. That is significant. And I realize a bunch of scientifically illiterate cave trolls are probably speed typing their unevidenced assertion that this is proof that being trans is a social contagion that is targeting children. But thankfully, reality doesn't give much of a damn about their feelings, so into the void they go. For those of us with an actual understanding of marginalization, the reason for the upward swing is rather clear. It's not that more people are being turned trans or even that more trans people are being born, but rather that more trans people are surviving longer and feel secure in coming out. The poster child for this phenomenon is, of course, left-handedness, as beautifully portrayed in this well-known chart showing how the rates of left-handedness increased massively from the year 1880 through to 2000. Because left-handedness, used to be demonized. Literally. Christianity, inspired by the Romans who were themselves inspired by the Greeks, associated left-handedness with demons and even the devil himself, a stigma that persisted in the West for centuries. Hell, it's even baked into our language. The Latin word for right? Dexter. The Latin word for left? Sinistra, aka sinister. This led left-handedness to be suppressed, with those who were left-handed hiding it. At least, until society began to change and left-handedness became less of a social stigma. That's all we're seeing here with regards to trans people. And this isn't the first time this has happened either. I remember 15-year-old me, fresh on YouTube in 2009, making videos defending the furry fandom, discussing how it was a safe haven for LGBT+ folk. And in those videos, I remember making use of David J. Russ' survey from The Sociology of Furry Fandom, a survey which, to be absolutely clear, has many methodological issues. But I was 15, hadn't even started college yet, and it was readily available. And one of the numbers stuck with me as someone who had only just discovered that she was bisexual after falling for a guy for the very first time, and that was the rate of bisexuality in the furry fandom, which stood at 48%. This blew my freaking mind! Not only was bisexuality a thing which was accepted in the community, but it was actually the largest demographic, compared to monosexual gay people at 19%, and heterosexual at 25%. Which is why I wasn't shocked when, fast forward 6 years to 2015, a YouGov survey came out about the fact that whilst only 23% of all British people identified as something other than strictly heterosexual, this number increased to 49% among 18 to 24-year-olds. To me, this was inevitable. This was the UK healing after centuries of bimisia and homomisia, drawing closer to the rate seen in the furry fandom. Because, while sure, the furry fandom being an accepting space for LGBT+ folk likely draws in a disproportionate number of us, we can't ignore the impact of double marginalization. Furry is a subculture, and one which, until much more recently, has been painted very negatively by mainstream institutions, marginalizing them. And once you're already marginalized for one thing, the desire or need to hide other aspects you might be marginalized for decreases, leading them to be more open, giving us a closer idea of the true numbers on human sexuality. So whilst the exact extent of this effect remained debatable, the YouGov survey confirmed this overall phenomenon for me. And that's what we're seeing here. There's no reason to think that the prevalence of trans births have increased among younger generations, so I take this 3.3% statistic to be a more accurate representation of our true numbers. That trans youth are feeling safer coming out in the US, in spite of everything, just like bisexual youth felt safer coming out in the UK in 2015. That's a big part of why we're seeing this upswing, which I find inspiring. Again, given the current climate. Trans children who grew up around the time of the transgender tipping point of 2014, a period in which trans folk entered the public consciousness as people to look up to and admire rather than a freak show to gawk at, have gone on to grow up and be open about who they are. And those people will go forward, connect with others, and inspire even more people who are closeted or trying to figure themselves out. Because, reminder, there were 2.2% questioning their gender, a portion of which are absolutely transgender. Not to forget those who were but refused to acknowledge it in any way, due to safety concerns. Then there's the impact these kids will have on the wider social ecosystem. Many surveys, including the one we covered in our last video, have made clear that higher exposure to a trans person, humanizing them, is associated with an increase in support. So to have more trans people come out and be seen, not as monsters in the news, but friends and family, will have a positive impact overall, which is something we need now, more than ever. That said, we do also have to prepare for the possibility that this number might decrease over the coming years because of, again, everything happening. But that doesn't mean that these trans people cease to exist, it just means more of them have gone back into hiding, waiting for a safer time. A time I am confident will come. And if you'd like to help us reach that goal, please consider becoming one of our patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Flynn, Loombat, Boea, Deborah Goldsmith, Higgins Siegel, Mix Alba, and Peter Cole. And with that, take care, and I'll catch you next time.